Hi guys, this is Nadia from Imbali Crafts, and today I want to show you how to make this super easy beginner's pendant. If you like my tutorials, consider subscribing because I upload new material every week. It would be absolutely awesome if you could give me a mention if you use them to help me grow my channel. Okay, should we get started? So to begin with, we need to cut our base wires. Now obviously the length will depend on your size of stone. I've used 35 centimeters, and what we need to do first is determine the actual gap. So there's a little trick that I use to create an even wrap. So you don't have to do that, but I find it quite helpful. So I thread on a fairly large bead, which in this case is a 12mm bead. And this is going to be big enough to create the kind of bezel that goes around the stone and make sure that it's even. So I'm going to begin by going to go off center roughly about the length of what the bezel is going to be. So you need to measure your stone and start off center about that length off center, if that makes any sense. And we're going to wrap around 5 times around the base, and then we're going to pop in the bead on the upper wire and wrap around the upper wire 5 times. So what the bead does here, it prevents the top wire from being bent out of shape by pulling the wire when you are wrapping over the top. So it's really little handy little tool to use if you are doing the weaving like that, because it really makes everything even. If you're not used to doing this by hand, this is really helpful. So just going to continue to do this. So zigzagging up and down and repeat the same pattern. It's a super easy bezeling technique, and it actually looks quite pretty from the outside. And the benefit of that sort of bezel as well is that you can use the rungs of the ladder, as I call it, to attach charms or beads or whatever else you want to attach to. So it's a fun little thing you can expand on, and it's a great way to set different types of stones. Now obviously this will be different with smaller stones. You'll need to use smaller wire or thinner wire, or conversely with bigger cabochons you're going to need slightly larger wire. It just depends. But yeah, it's very versatile. That's what it looks like so far. So once we've done a full length, you obviously need to make sure that it fits your stone, which I believe I haven't done in this section, so you'll need to add some in. So we're going to shape it around the stone, and just take your time with that because you don't want the wires to actually buckle. So you can see here I've gone a little bit too short on the one side. So what I'll do is I'll just fill that out. Really easy to do. You don't need to undo everything. And then once they meet up top, you can just continue. And what I'm doing here is I'm bending out the bezel wires at an angle so that they meet up parallel. So I'm just squishing them in, and that's what they look like, and this will keep your stone in place already. There's quite a lot of friction on this wire, so as long as the bezel fits, it will be all right. So what we're needing to do next is separating the front bezel wires from the back bezel wires, and we're going to do a figure of 8 weave around the 2 front ones and the 2 back ones. So we're going to spread them out and using and reusing the wire from the bezel. So just, or you can add in, it doesn't really matter. I just tend to, as I said in many of my tutorials before, I reuse a lot of my wires. Many people don't like that and just add in as they go, so that's entirely up to you. There's a lot of wire in the way if you keep it in. I just prefer it, but it's entirely up to you. So figure of 8 weave around the 2 front wires, then we're going to switch it over and we're going to do a couple of figure of 8 weaves around the back. It doesn't really matter what kind of weave you do at all, as long as it binds the 2 wires together. So this is just to close off the bezel, and you won't even see this later on, so it doesn't really matter what you do here as long as it's nice and secure. figure of 8 weave is just what came to mind, so I've been using it. So once we've done that, scoot the weave down with your wires and it should be pretty secure. You can further secure the stone by squashing down on the frame on the outside, but it usually isn't necessary. So what we're going to do next is we're bringing the wires from behind parallel to the wires to the front. So to do this, we're kind of bending them at a slight angle. You can see here I'm using my bent nose pliers. They are so handy. If you don't have any, I highly recommend getting them. They really changed my sort of weaving life, if you will. They're fantastic. So once we've bent these in and they're all parallel, we're going to start shaping the bezel. That's what it looks like so far. And what we need to do now is create a sort of oval shape, because we're going to weave with the shape already in place. You can't really do this weave with the wires and shape it later, because obviously the weave will follow the direction of the wire. So make sure that it's all nice, symmetrical and parallel to each other. You can see my weaving wires are getting in the way. All right, so you're bending this in and just take your time with that. And once it's all symmetrical, we are going to then bend out the wires at the top and make sure they sit parallel to each other and the angles kind of match up so that it's perfectly symmetrical, and that's what it looks like. So there are various ways to create bales. I've done another little tutorial on a different type of bale, and this one is slightly different in that it crisscrosses the wires rather than hide them from underneath. And the way this works is we are wrapping the weaving wire around both wires once from over the top. Then we come in between the two wires and wrap around the outer wire once from the top. And then we go to the inner wire and wrap around it once from over the top, or we do not go a full revolution. So I'm going to do this again slowly. So we go over both wires, come in between the two wires and wrap it around the outer wire once fully. We come over the top and we do not wrap around the inside wire at all. We just go over the top, pull that tight, and then we go under and over the other side once. Bring it in between the two wires, wrap it around one full revolution around the outer wire, and then we kind of loop it over the top without wrapping and bring it across, and we repeat. So from underneath, over both wires once, like so, in between the two wires, one full revolution around the outer wire, bring it up so it points up, and then we kind of drape it over the inside wire, and we are repeating the process. And I always press down on the wires to make sure it's tight. So we're going to continue. So now we're getting to the center, and this is always a little bit tricky when the wires start to kind of recede back to a point. So the wires will slip and you need to make sure they stay in place. So you'll see me do the weave, and as I zigzag my way across, I'm going to start putting my fingers to hold the wire in place as I weave. And I do this as I put the wire in place to stop it from sliding up. Now, one other trick is if you hold this weave upright, and rather than weaving from left to right like I do here, if you hold it upright and you're weaving from up to down, and push and pull on the wires when you're weaving, it kind of holds it in place as well. I hope that makes sense. But yeah, that's how, and it works really well as well. So next, you can use bale making pliers. You don't have to. You can use your fingers, which I quite often do as well. In this case, I just decided to use the pliers to shape it. So any object obviously will work for that. So it doesn't have to be bale making pliers. So we're going to shape it and opening up the back, and we are just going to separate out the 4 wires and using the 2 innermost to secure the bail to the pendant. So we're going to push this together like so, and we are now going to drape the two innermost wires around the bail itself like so. And the next one, and one wrap is enough. You don't even need to do a full wrap. The wire will hold this in place nicely, so you don't need to do much more than that. So next, we are going to flip the pendant onto our back. So this is the back, and we're going to twist the two wires we've just wrapped around the bail like so. So start a twist just about 1/2 centimeter or so. This is just more like a decorative sort of design for the back. Obviously the bezel will keep the stone in place, but to have something extra holding it in place is never a bad idea. So I'm going to add the detail at the back, which will also look pretty. So in essence, this makes it a reversible pendant. So what we're going to do next is spreading out the wires that we've just twisted, and we're going to loop these as a sort of decorative detail in a anti-clockwise motion. Do this again, and you can do this as many times as you want, as long as the loops kind of fit within the frame we've just created. So push and pull. Kind of makes me think of an Ed Sheeran song. Bad joke. Right, so I'm going to push these together, and obviously the more time you spend on doing these, I'm such a stickler for symmetry, so I spend a lot of time on that sort of stuff. I'm such a slow wrapper, but I prefer it that way because it helps me to keep things symmetrical. So do this on the other side, and then we're going to trim off the wires at the loop. So the loops need to meet so they don't get stuck in any clothing when you're wearing your pieces. So squish them together so that the ends meet. Next, just use a piece of your 0.4 wire to secure it to the frame in any which way. So just go through the frame and through the loop, and then kind of double back to attach it. Super easy, and especially with that type of bezel, it's much easier than with any other type, so easy to attach. So once you've done that, trim off those wires as well, and everything should be neat and tidy. Just make sure you trim off the wires pointing inwards so you can tuck them away. Right, so next we're going to create a detail at the front. We're going to use the left wire of the bail. Sorry, I'm talking rubbish. This is the right wire. Too early in the morning for me today. And we're going to repeat the same pattern we have done at the back, except what we are going to do this time is we're reducing the loops in size as we go down to create a sort of interest. So each time you create a new loop, we make it a little bit smaller. It's going to get a little bit tougher as we get towards the end, and in that event you can just take your, again, my trusty bent nose pliers to make the loops smaller, like so, and you can squeeze in one more, I guess. So I'm going to do that. There you go, and we're going to squish it down, and then once again we're going to cut off the end, and we're going to be attaching it with some 0.4 wire to the frame. Now I've only attached it at the bottom, but you can attach the loops obviously at the further on in the frame as well. So next we're going to shape the bail. So I like to push down on the crossing wires to give it a little bit more of a concave look. Don't have to do that, but I think it looks better this way. Now there are many ways to decorate this. You could, wrap a stone with other wires which you could add in. You could put copper beads. You could put microfaceted gemstones, or in this case I've decided to use a wire, that leftover wire from the other side, and I'm going to stick to the theme of creating sort of loops to decorate. So I'm going to twist this again anti-clockwise. I'm coming up and I'm going to go clockwise. So this creates a little bit of a different detail. So going up. And once again, you can sort of size the loops. And then just repeat. And this is such a pretty detail. I've actually made one of those settings. You can use it with square wire where you use it to set faceted gemstones. This tutorial is also on my channel somewhere. I'll add a sort of card to the end so you can find it if you want to try it. Very pretty setting. Obviously it needs some extra securing, but it looks pretty. So once we've done that, we need to secure this wire to the bail. So we're going to do is just go around the bail once. And we're going to pull this through and just wrap around it, and we're going to trim it off, leave a little bit of a tail that you can then bend around and tuck it in to the weave so that again it doesn't get stuck when you're wearing your pieces. Just kind of roll it in and press it into the weave as much out of the way as possible. And then obviously flatten out any bits that may stick up and adjust. That's what it looks like so far. So now we're going to add in some seed beads or copper beads, and I'm just reusing a piece for my bail. This is why I never cut my wires, because I tend to reuse them all the time, but it makes my whole work look like a spaghetti junction at all times, so it's not everybody's cup of tea. But I like the less weaving wire I have to add in. I find the more secure everything is, because obviously there's nothing where it can slide out, or you know what I mean. So I prefer to do that. So we're going to add seed beads or copper beads depending on the size of your stone or how many beads you want. You just need to decide what kind of detail you want there. So add accordingly. I've decided to go the whole left length of the stone. So I'm going to go around and add as many beads as I can. And they're different sizes, so they go from small to big to small. I thought that looks quite nice. And once again, we're going to attach to the frame. And then we're going to attach the beads at the center of the frame as well to keep them from getting hooked on something. So just use another piece of wire. If you happen to struggle to attach them, I recommend to use a T-pin to open up the frame, because that is very handy to do and it makes it much easier. And that's that. So once your pendant's done, cut off all the wires, and that's the project finished. So thank you all for watching. I really hope you enjoyed this. If you like my tutorials, please consider subscribing. And if you'd like to see what I get up to otherwise, why not visit my Facebook, Instagram, or TikTok, and visit my our little community group which we have. It's called Wire Wrap and Jewelry Artists Worldwide. We always have fun projects and challenges going, and it's a fast growing, amazing community full of brilliant artists. So it would be lovely to have you there. And last but not least, if you're in the UK and want some square and half round wire, or see some of my workshops and tutorials, consider visiting.